friends, and welcome back to the Rewind podcast of Forward Church. Join us each week as we take a look back on Sunday's message and dig a little deeper into the conversations with those who are teaching across our sites at Forward. We want to invite you to be part of the conversation too. So if something we're talking about on Sunday morning sparks a question in you, head to our website, forwardchurch.ca/ask us, and submit your questions there. And we're going to do our best to engage with those questions in this space. With that said, let's jump in and get started.
Good day, Forward Church family. Happy New Year. And I hope you guys had a great Christmas and New Year season. As you can see, it's just Pastor Derek and I today. And we're going to do a bit of a different podcast today.
A year in review.
Yeah, a year in review, looking back at all that God has done in our church family over the past year. And we want to celebrate God's faithfulness to us as a church. I love that we get to do this because sometimes when we give reports on what God's doing, we can only give like quick snapshots and tell like one or two things at a time. But this is a chance to kind of step back and look at the whole picture.
Yeah. Also, I don't know about you, Kirk, but I always am moving forward to the next thing, and I don't take enough time to stop and reflect about where we've been.
Yeah.
And this is a good time to just stop and reflect all that we have been through together as a church, all the ways that we've seen God work. It was good.
Yeah,
really
good. It has been. It's been really great. Now, you guys had, just first of all, you guys had a good Christmas.
We had a great Christmas. Good. Yeah, it was. I was telling you earlier this morning, it's a perfect rhythm for me. I want to see everybody, but I don't want to be rushed.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be too busy. It was just a nice amount of busy.
Yeah. And same with us. We had our family over on Christmas Day. Some of our kids decided to spring over to our place on Christmas Eve as well. They came for church on the Sunday afternoon service, and then came over for dinner on Christmas Eve, and that was great. We had pizza for Christmas Eve.
You're at the point now where it's like they come back to the house. Now I know they're back and they're in the area, but the idea of having everybody back
it's great, right? It's a great season, and I mean the volume level in my house
goes much higher. It's not you can't just hear the cats anymore.
No, and then it gets much quieter when they're gone. But it was great, and just to be able to spend that time together as a family. And I want to say thank you to many in our church who reached out to me because of it being first Christmas after my mom passed away. And I really appreciate your prayers and your love for our family during this season. And I know that there were a lot of people who have suffered a lot of losses over the past year as well. And it's been cool to see and hear stories of how God's people have rallied around each other and loved each other well in the midst of some of those losses over the past year. So I want to just encourage you, church, keep doing that. Keep caring for each other in those kinds of ways. Derek, if you were to kind of step back, I was trying to think about my own life and trying to summarize my own life in the past year.
Okay.
But think about our church.
Yeah.
If you were to try to summarize Forward in like a word or a sentence or a phrase over the last 12 months, what are some things what's one thing that comes to mind for you?
I think if I was to put it into two words, I'd put it into new beginnings.
Yeah.
I think in a lot of ways, you and I now, we've spent 3 years in this role, but the last ministry year, so 2022, then into 2023, in many ways was our first relatively normal ministry year, right? Where we weren't dealing with various restrictions, the realities of COVID, all of that stuff started to be kind of in the rearview mirror. And I know for many people, just looking around, even looking around on Sunday mornings, it was like this is a new church in some ways, both in our Kitchener and our Cambridge location. And then we have an Ingersoll microsite, and they're new, and so we're new still relatively. And so it was for me, it was the year where we really kind of got into things. We'd started to make our introductions, and then this past year it's just felt like when things really started to get rolling for us.
Yeah, I think that's a really good word for it. For me, I would just say it felt in a good, stepping back and looking back at the last year, I went, wow, all that actually happened.
Yeah.
This last year. There was a lot that happened.
Well, again, we one of the things that happened all the time with COVID is you make plans, then the plans would be rewritten fully, right?
Yeah,
and so
true.
the first time where we started into a ministry here, we had plans, and the plans actually started to come to fruition.
It was awesome to watch and reflect on, but to be able to see. I don't want to overuse this term, but really God's faithfulness throughout the year and God's Spirit moving in some great ways in the life of our church.
Yeah.
That's been so exciting for me to be able to be a part of.
Sure.
I know when I talked to, I was meeting recently with someone from another ministry, not a church, but a parachurch ministry, and they were asking me about life at Forward, and I said, honestly, I think that this is the best thing going. I love this church. I love what God's doing in this church. And I'm so eternally grateful for what the Spirit of God is doing in our lives and through us as a church family.
Yeah, I mean, you and I get the pleasure of hearing from people on a weekly and oftentimes daily basis of just hearing what God is doing in people's lives, whether that's in their life through the discipleship group I love hearing stories where I was totally unaware of something, and then all of a sudden I hear about this discipleship group that's doing something, or the impact they've made in the lives of the people who are a part of that group. Mm-hmm. We don't get to see that firsthand, but oftentimes after a service, we'll get to talk with people who, God's just moving and working. And one of the things that I always find fascinating after service is when someone comes up and this, were you thinking about me this week? When it's like, no, but you know what? What's really cool is God was thinking about you when He brought you out and when He orchestrated this, and as He was moving in your heart through the Holy Spirit today. I just love when we see stuff. We're just like, this is just God doing the stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so cool to watch. So, if you have ever been a part of any of our services in person, then you know that the beginning of our services, we play a video every week. And that video is really there to remind us as a church what our mission is and to keep that in front of us, that we want to make disciples of Jesus who love God, love others, and serve the world. And we actually break down in that video, what do we mean by loving God? What do we mean by loving others and serving the world? And so I thought it would be good for us today just to reflect back on those things. Like we say, that's who we want to be. And how do we see God working in some of these different places? So in the world of loving God, we often talk about kind of three areas in particular in terms of just good rhythms for people to have in their life. One is just your own personal walk with God, your devotions, your prayer life, those kinds of things. Yep. We talk about the importance of gathering with God's people to worship God together as a church family. And we talk about the importance of giving. And, Jesus says that where our hearts are, our treasures will be also. No. Oh, man. Where our treasure is, there our hearts
there your
are
heart
also.
Will be also, yeah.
And so there's just that reality that says, like, hey, what we do give is actually a reflection of our love for God.
Yeah.
And so we're going to just kind of zero in on that area and just what are we seeing God doing in our church family in terms of love for God. And I think, when it comes to our worship services, we've just been seeing so many cool things in the world of worship in the life of our church.
Yeah, I've loved to see, one thing that I've heard many people comment on is how the volume level of singing. Of course, volume level of worship. I'm always going to hear comments about volume. But what I've loved hearing is just people, man, just like it's just hearing people sing and people are singing out and singing the songs. And I experienced that. And it's just this people's hearts being engaged with the words that we're singing, right? And understanding this is not Christian karaoke.
Yeah.
These are words that we are both singing to our God and preaching to ourselves oftentimes. We say, I know there's times where I'm singing those songs and I'm like, I need to sing these songs because my heart needs to echo these and believe these words today.
That's right.
Right? And it's been so neat to see our churches grow in worship engagement. And just thinking through where we've been, I was thinking back through what we've covered on Sunday mornings in terms of opening God's Word. So we started for beginning of the year in the book of Haggai. We did a series called First Things First. Yep. thought that was just a great way to kind of set up and start a year. Probably a book that many of our people have not spent a ton of time in. And it's only 2 chapters, so it was good to go through. And then we spent a long period of time. In fact, I left halfway through, came back at the very end of it. We were still going in 1 Corinthians.
So what people don't know, here's a good side story looking back on the year. So your son, Luke, came up to me before you left on your sabbatical.
Yeah.
And Luke, he comes up to me one Sunday morning. He's like, Kirk, I figured something out. And I'm like, what'd you figure out, Luke? He goes, I figured out that my dad planned his sabbatical so that you could handle all the difficult passages in 1 Corinthians. And I'm like, well, that's
I challenged him after that. And I said, Luke, look at some of the things I've talked about, man. You want to go up and preach on those? But that was one of the great things about going through 1 Corinthians, right? Is like, hey, we talked about some real stuff.
Yeah. And
stuff that, if you're not walking through a book, just to our church as a pastor, like, there's things that you don't love having to deal with because they're going to be difficult things to deal with. And yet the difficult things to deal with are important to deal with.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just so good for us as a church to walk through and to understand, wow, like human nature doesn't change a lot, does it?
That's right.
And then we went into, just before we got into and kind of starting off our year with the foundation of prayer, a new ministry year in 2023. And then we did our core values series, unpacked kind of some of the things that kind of shape how we make decisions and think about things here at Forward, what makes us uniquely us. Yes, we have a mission of loving God, making disciples of Jesus Christ who love God, love others, and serve the world. Now, our hope would be that whether it's articulated that way or not, that every faithful church, that's what we're about, right? But there's some things that I think make us unique and different in how we process through what we do or won't do, and I think that was helpful, and then we've finished off kind of the last bit of this year, last 2.5 months, just looking at who God is, and thought Andrew and Kevin finished us off really well this week, just rooting us in. Hey, we covered these things, and here's the great thing as we change into a new year. All those things that we've talked about, God, whatever change 2024 may bring, that's not going to change.
Yeah, that's right. And I know just talking to different people at our sites, the ways that God's been using the preaching of the word to impact and shape their lives has been so encouraging to see. And there are just so many stories from people talking about how the preaching on Sundays are really, God's just using it to reveal things in their life, heal things in their life. It's just been really beautiful to watch over the course of the past year. Now, when we talk about worship, we don't just mean Sunday mornings, or when we talk about prayer, we don't just mean Sunday mornings.
We don't just mean singing.
Right. We don't just mean singing. We have, we've hosted a number of prayer and worship nights. The most recent one that we had was in Kitchener. And man, that was such a great night where we worshiped together and prayed together as a church family from all of our sites. It was just fantastic to be able to be part of that. And I know that we've also seen God working in the lives of our youth as well when it comes to worship.
Yeah, that's really been neat to watch. And I've been in a few different nights over the course of the year because I've got kids and youth and just dropping them off, seeing what's going on. So getting back into a regular rhythm of having a worship team and worship band, seeing so many youth begin to participate in that has been really neat. But then seeing the growth of engagement in worship. And Kirk, I know you have a cool story that came from Nate as to like Bedlam and what Bedlam was like. A bunch of junior highs. That's our junior high retreat that we do with all of our other fellowship. James cheering. And we bring there's like 700 junior highs there at Muskoka Woods.
Like, chaos.
Yeah, total chaos.
Total chaos. But a space where, all these youth gather together and they're learning and they're being challenged about their faith and their walk with God. And I remember Nate telling me a story about how, and Britt as well, both of them were telling me this story about how just at Bedlam, we saw so many of our youth, like right away, they were not hesitating when it came to entering into worship. At the very beginning of the entire retreat weekend, first session,
is like, first session, by the way, guys, is like 10:30 at night on a Sunday, on a Friday night after a long day of school and a bus ride up.
A bus ride. Like, what could be more fun than that? And they're sitting there, and they, like, our youth group from Forward entered into worship right away. Like, hands were in the air, and they were locked into worshiping God. And that is just so cool.
Well, Kirk, think about when you were in grade 7, grade.
I wasn't doing any of that stuff.
Well, for sure, I'm not doing anything before I look around the room and see are other people doing this.
Yeah,
right?
But our youth were taking the lead in the room, and it's just so cool to be able to hear and see those kinds of stories happening as well. And I know that, we have seen God continue to also grow the number of people who are connecting in with our worship services.
Yeah.
I know Kitchener, we've seen some growth in Kitchener with the number of people. Most people wouldn't know, Derek, how many people actually are still online every single week.
In fact, our online continues to grow.
Yeah.
Even as our in-person has grown, our online has continued. It's not one's growing, one's shrinking, they're both growing.
Yeah. Which is, we have like a medium-sized church.
Well, large
in
church.
Canada.
In Canada, it's a large church. It's 500 to 600 people worshiping online regularly, weekly.
Yeah, which is really wild. So when you put together all of our locations, I just did some quick numbers. So for the numbers, people who are watching or listening, here's some quick numbers. In 2023, our average attendance for Sunday worship services was, including online people, it was about 1,400 people.
Yeah.
Year before, it was a little under 1,200 people.
Yeah, it's this very significant growth.
Yeah. So, God be praised, and he's giving us the opportunity to keep investing in more people and welcoming more people into the life of our church family in that way. And so it's really, really cool to see. One of the things that I know both of us are passionate about is not just what happens on Sunday morning.
We forgot baptisms.
Oh, yeah, baptisms.
We should probably talk about that.
We should talk about
one
baptisms.
of the evidences of us seeing people come to know God and grow.
All right. So we had in the past 12 months, we had 51 people baptized in the life of our church, which is awesome.
Yeah.
It's so encouraging.
And every one of those is an incredible story. We get to hear some of the stories, and I love hearing those stories. But each one of those stories represents a unique way where God has worked and drawn somebody to himself, and usually through his people and through his church, and used people in our. One of the things I've loved personally, just something that I've always longed to see, and this year we got to see it, was people in our church who have had a significant impact in the lives of individuals be a part of baptizing those people. I just think that is so cool. Again, it goes back. We were in 1 Corinthians, and one of the things I always think is neat that Paul says, "Hey, I'm thankful I didn't baptize like barely any of you."
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah,
love seeing it. One of the things that we really want to be passionate about is not just people showing up at church, but people walking with God on a daily basis themselves, right? Engaging in God's word, growing in your own personal prayer life, because this is about your walk with God. And how he wants to shape your life.
You can't live off one meal a week.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I haven't told you the story yet. I had on Christmas Eve, I had a person come up to me and tell me how, so twice during the past year, I hosted a YouVersion daily Bible reading thing, just to encourage people to, in community, engage in daily devotions together. And I had somebody come up to me and they said, I just want you to know that a year ago, I joined the daily devotional thing you did on YouVersion. And she said to me, that is what became the catalyst for me. And every day for the past year, I've been reading my Bible.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I was like, that's so cool. Yeah. And, just to be able to see how this person continued to carry on in their walk with God and engaging with God every day through the scriptures, it was just so cool.
I did an Equip class back in the winter session of 2023.
Seems so long ago.
It does seem so long ago. And one guy came up to me, it was probably midway through the class, and said, been in church for 40 years. This is the first time I've started to regularly read my Bible. And I was like, man, well, first, I wish it had happened sooner, but I love the fact that it's never too late.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah. That's so cool. real quick, I know that some of you are wondering about the giving and where do we end up on the giving. We don't have all the final numbers yet for giving in terms of multiply or the year-end giving, so we will get that out to you as soon as we have it. But I do want to say this. I am so grateful. God has been leading people in our church to give. And in the calendar year of 2023, compared to the calendar year 2022, I know our fiscal year is different, but our calendar year, we actually saw a growth of about $150,000 in our general giving.
That's great.
And God's just been faithful, and
it's not been an easy year.
No,
like I think we all know this. It's for a lot of people, especially people who are living on a budget.
Yeah,
all the things that are kind of necessities have gone up in price, and oftentimes paychecks haven't kept up to that price. So we know it's been a sacrifice for a lot of people.
Yeah, we do, and like church, we know that we've talked to you quite candidly about the costs of. Like everybody else's costs have been going up, and the cost of doing ministry has continued to rise as well. And so you have responded to that challenge, and we just want to say thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And I think that is a revealing of where your heart is at, as Jesus told us. So thank you for honoring God and worshiping God in that way through your giving. Let's shift over to talking about the love others piece in our mission. And one of the real highlights of the year, so when we talk about love others, we usually talk about what it means to love our families and be invested in our families, and also what does it look like to love our church family.
Yeah.
And so one of the highlights in the past year was we hosted a marriage conference.
We did. It was great.
In February.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a great time. Like we had about 200 people from different churches, including our own church, come and be a part of that event, and just to be able to hear some stories of how God was working in the lives of couples as they gathered together at that event. And if you were there and you've forgotten some of the things that you learned, pull out your notebook, review some of the things that you talked about and learned. We just heard so many good stories.
And also we got to hear LMA on a panel.
Who could ever forget LMA on a panel sharing her wisdom about marriage?
I thought we're just going to stop here and just let LMA share.
I wasn't sure what Dave was thinking while LMA was up there. But it was great.
Yeah, it was. That panel discussion was fantastic. I love that. I love that. I love hearing, it was 3 couples in our church, different lengths of time, and just hearing the stories of how the ups and downs in their marriages and how God has been present and faithful in it all. I think gave a lot of hope to a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when we talk about, loving our church family, we usually talk about the importance of connecting with each other. And there's kind of a couple of ways people connect and love each other as a church family is joining a discipleship group and serving on a serve team. It's been cool to be able to see just the growth of people, first of all, serving in the life of our church.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that's neat to see is all ages involved in serving. When we had our kind of leaders training summit back in September, one of the things I was so struck by was the intergenerational nature of who was leading and serving at Forward Church. And it was just like an incredible blessing to me, because it was just from like high school students through, and those are people who are leading, because some of those high school students, my daughter being one of them, is a grade 12 student who's leading a D group. So we have people who are serving who are, if you go in our tech room, what you'll see a whole whackload of like junior high through high school students running a lot of the things that are taking place on Sunday morning from a tech perspective, which is so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's very cool. And I actually pulled out a quick number. We have about 70 people under the age of 18 who are serving between all of our sites.
Regularly.
They're on a serve team.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I had one of our preteens actually serve me the communion cup at a recent communion service, and it was just fantastic.
I had my son serve me a communion cup because I didn't have one up there. But I did think, because he stopped to serve a bunch of other people on the way up while I was waiting. And I was like, hey man, like, at some point you can bring this thing up to me. It was great.
And for those of you who don't know what Derek's talking about with the leadership event, so like every year, around September, sometime middle of September or so, we are hosting what we call the Forward Leadership Summit. We pull together, we invite all of our leaders from all of our sites to come together for a night where we have dinner together, and then we also spend some time doing some training on some different ministry elements. And man, it's so good to have all of our leaders. We have usually about 120-ish leaders together from Ingersoll and Kitchener and Cambridge. And we have a lot of fun together, and we just learn and grow and build some relationship with each other. And I'm so grateful for all of those leaders. And I'm really grateful for everyone who's serving. We have almost 480 people right now who are on a serve team in the life of our church. And so, thank you for being part of the mission to live out what God's called us to be and do as a church. You guys are loving each other well. And I know sometimes some of you are in roles. I've talked to some of you who are like, I don't know why I'm in this role, but I want to tell you, you're in that role, and God's using you to show great love to the rest of the church family. And we appreciate you, both the ones that we can see who are in very public roles, but also the ones who are in very much behind the scenes roles that nobody ever sees. You collectively are just making such a huge difference.
It all makes a difference. The things that we've been talking about take place because everybody takes part, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, Derek, you alluded to this earlier about our discipleship groups and, just stories of people caring for each other in their group, and the way that God's been working and moving in those places. I know for me and for a few others that I know who are in discipleship groups, it has been such a place of incredible joy. When my mom passed away, we had a meal afterwards for our family after the funeral was done. And most of the food from the meal came from a combination of some of our staff as well as the people who are in my discipleship group. And I was able to say to my family, some of whom don't go to church, I was able to say to them, hey, I just want you all to know that our lunch today is being provided by the people who are in our discipleship group and who are part of our church family. And to watch these people's mouths just drop, literally, I watch people, their mouths drop going, wow. And I'm like, yeah, this is what it means to be part of the church and to be connected in community and relationship with each other in this kind of way where you're growing together in Christ, but you also have each other's backs and you're loving each other well.
Yeah. I know. I did a funeral this past year for a gal who had come to faith here at Forward, and also tied in with one of our ladies' discipleship groups. And just talking to the family afterwards, many of them, she was the only one who regularly attended here at Forward, but they all knew about this group and the impact that group had on her life, and how much she loved the church, but so much of what she meant by the church was that group of women who had loved her and invested in her and in her family. And I just was blown away by the impact that the testimony of those women had in embracing and loving her, how it had filtered out to this entire family of people who were like, she just loved Forward Church and she loved Jesus.
Yeah. It's so good. And I know that many of you are in discipleship groups. We have hundreds of people. I think the last number I saw, when you include our youth who are also in D groups, I think that's one thing maybe many of you don't realize is that discipleship groups is actually something we have built in at all ages in the life of our church. So all of our kids in kids ministry are in small groups. And you get into youth ministry and you're in discipleship groups, and that moves into being adults as well. We just believe in the importance of people not just coming into big group gatherings, but being able to connect with a smaller group of people to help grow each other and support each other and sharpen each other in our spiritual lives. And so we have, between our youth and our adults, we're sitting at about 450 people who are in discipleship groups right now. And I just want to encourage people, like, keep going. If you're in your discipleship groups, keep learning and growing together. And, some of you might be in a spot where you need to be thinking about adding and either adding people to your group, or some of you have grown to a spot where
you need to become leaders.
You need to become leaders.
Yeah.
You need to step out of your discipleship group and you need to start to lead other people.
Eric, there will be people who are listening to this right now, and the Holy Spirit is saying to them, "That's you."
Yeah,
and you need to do it. And I'm going to tell you, because we're about to do a push for the fact that we've got a lot of people who we didn't really get a chance to do a full push this fall, but we've got a lot of new people who have come who need to get involved in groups, and we need some leaders who are going to jump in and lead those groups.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that there have been a number of new groups that have started. I know in Kitchener we've had a bunch of new groups that have started, and in Cambridge as well. And I'm just hearing some good stories of what God's doing as those groups get going. But I know that we will need more leaders in the days ahead, because we have people who want to get into groups, but we may not always have spaces to be able to put them in.
Hey, I think something we haven't mentioned yet when we're on the topic of groups is how cool it was that one of our own staff wrote a book and took the women through.
That was awesome.
A study this year. So
so proud of Rachel.
Yeah, she put a ton into that.
She did.
And then two, how many of our women have been stepping forward in women's ministry groups to lead? And I know we've got coming up in the new year here, as the women will be walking through Ecclesiastes, a lot of that is going to be a number of women from our church sharing their stories and how that connects into the story of Ecclesiastes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so cool to watch. Yeah. Really shout out to Rachel and the many people who actually supported Rachel along the way.
And I got to put one other shout out here.
All right.
Kirk has done a ton of work over the last couple of years in getting our leadership school up and going. We are now into the full third year.
We are, yeah.
And so now it's 3 years in length when you commit in, and it's been so cool as I look at that first cohort to see the ways that they're serving and the ways that they've grown and are stepping into things, and then looking down the line and seeing this grow out, and seeing now some of those leaders stepping into teaching equip classes and maybe stepping into doing some of the modules down the road here. So it's neat to see that leadership development taking place in our church.
Yeah, it's encouraging, and I'm grateful for what the Lord's doing as people are seeing God's call in their life to step into these kinds of opportunities for leadership. When we let's shift to the whole serve the world element, and thinking about when we talk about serving the world, we're talking about like outside of our church, our influence, our love for the people in our community, our region, around the world, how we're pointing people to Jesus, how we're caring for people. And man, we have had quite the year on that front. It's just been cool to watch. I know that. Let's start local and then we'll talk global. What have been some of the highlights for you on more the local side of things?
Yeah, so couple big highlights for me. One has been seeing people take the call to go out and bring the good news to people personally.
Yeah.
And that's happened in a whole bunch of different ways. There are some individuals in our church who, like, God has just called them to go out and just get out on the streets and share the good news of Jesus with the people they meet. And I love it. And hearing stories of them sharing their faith and people coming to know Christ. So many of you have taken up the challenge of regularly praying for people around you who are lost, and having others come alongside you and pray together. And that has been so cool. We've got a big list actually in our hallway of names that we are praying for regularly, that you have submitted and said, I'm praying for these people to come to faith. And what often happens that I end up hearing is those people who you're praying for, not surprisingly, God often puts the burden on you to be the one to go and share the gospel with. And so I'll have people come up and say, hey, we've been praying for so-and-so. I'm sitting down and having coffee with them this week, and I really need to have the boldness to share the gospel with them. And hearing stories of that taking place has been just really. I just feel this growing sense of ownership for evangelism. That our goal isn't just to get them into a church and let somebody else share the gospel with them, but we each personally have the responsibility to be sharing our faith with those who God has placed around us. And you hear that from our elders all the time. I just want to shout out some of our elders who I know are setting the tone and the tempo in that area, and just to deeply appreciate those men.
I want to tell one story on that. So this is a Forward Kitchener story. I was teaching at Forward Kitchener one Sunday towards the end of the year, and there were a bunch of faces that I just did not recognize. And after the service, one of our members from Forward Kitchener came up to me and said, "Kirk, I got to tell you this story." I'm like, "Okay." And he says, "So I was at the gas station yesterday. I'm at the gas station, and I'm pumping gas, and I just start shooting up a conversation with the guy, and the next thing I know, God's telling me I need to invite the guy to church, and he came to church today." And I'm like, that's amazing. And not only that, like he came with his friend. The guy came with a friend. And these are guys who like have no understanding of Christianity. And so after the service was over, this guy not only talked to them, but said, "Hey, did you understand the things that we were talking about with the gospel there?" And the guy's like, "A little bit." And then this person went, "Let me tell you more," and kind of went in and dove in more. And so like that is just an example, one example of what God's doing where people are taking ownership of the gospel.
And then, we really kicked some of our community center stuff off this year, where we're trying to open up our building to make it a place where we're using it all the time. And I love the fact I walk into the building now, and it almost doesn't matter the day or the time. There are cars in the parking lot. There are people in this building. But it's not just a matter of getting people into a building. That's a start, because really we do have this reality that we live in a post-Christian culture where many people have never walked into a church facility before. And so crossing that threshold is crossing a barrier. It's making a place familiar and less daunting to somebody.
That's right.
But it's the relationships that take place within that. And hearing stories. Let me give you a story about our pickleball group. So for those of you who don't know, we have a night, I think it's Tuesday.
In Cambridge.
Yes.
Because pickleball in Kitchener would be difficult.
Yeah, in Cambridge. In Cambridge, we have pickleball night. I think it's Tuesday. They open up the gym.
Yeah, it is Tuesday nights.
And the place is packed.
Yeah.
Because everybody's looking for pickleball courts everywhere. It's so packed that we've got a bunch of guys there and girls who are waiting around for a court. And so they sit down and they're having coffees out in the lobby, and it's creating all sorts of opportunity to facilitate conversations between people who are part of our church community here and people who are just from the community, just wanting to play some pickleball. And it's been neat to hear how those conversations are developing relationships. And those are the type, it's building the bridge to begin to create opportunities for people to hear the gospel.
Right. So when we talk about building bridges to the gospel in the Multiply campaign, this is the example of what we're talking about.
That's it. A great example of this, on Friday nights in Cambridge, there is we do a community dinner. And we have all sorts of people come in. A lot of international students who are here for college and university who are coming in and having a meal on Friday nights. And just a few weeks ago, Brad Wiley had the opportunity to share the gospel and lead a guy to faith who was just here originally just to come and enjoy a meal together at the table.
Yeah, it's a fantastic way. A story I just heard around people who are sharing faith. So there's a couple in Kitchener who are in a discipleship group, and God's been working in their life in a variety of ways. And just this past week, actually through a conversation with Pastor Daryl, ended up coming to faith.
Yes.
And it's just so cool to see that.
One of our Kitchener groups had the first ever that I know of wedding.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great.
It was a couple who had been living together, kind of came to church, came to know Christ, realized, hey, we need to get married. And then Brian Mullins was able to officiate the wedding because he's ordained. He's part of the group, and they hosted it at Josh and Melanie's, and it was awesome.
Yeah. And so now this couple is actually looking at getting baptized, and it's awesome.
So cool.
Now, I know that like you just talked about Cambridge in terms of community center activities. But as the years progressed, we've been praying about Kitchener and saying like, hey, how can we do something similar? What does that look like in Kitchener? And God's been starting to open up some doors.
Yeah, we did a thing for parents who have ADHD kids, and how do you parent kids with those special exceptionalities and needs. Safe Families has become kind of a core anchor. We've had Safe Families here, but it's also become part of a core anchor organization in Kitchener that many of our families in Kitchener have got involved with. And Jen is heading that up in Kitchener and doing a great job of getting families engaged and involved. And they just did, between Safe Families and some families from the local school at Pioneer Park, bought a bunch of Christmas gifts and took them and blessed those families, had some great connections over the Christmas time.
Yeah, and we have a new leader in Kitchener who's going to work on some community center activities there.
So if you're interested, you talk to Steve Hicks.
Yep, and it's just awesome. God's kind of opening some doors and pulling some things together. So,
and I know our Ingersoll site too. Yeah. Like they are always involved and engaged.
Man, are they ever? I just saw some pictures of them serving out in the community, and it's so cool. It's so cool to see. Let's shift gears to our global engagement piece. You were with a group of people from our church who went to Tanzania in the summer, and that was an amazing experience.
It was awesome. It was really good to meet our partners on the ground. We had started and come on as a kind of the core partner for the Amani School as they started a new high school portion of their program just a little less than a year before. And so we got to go and meet our partners on the ground, meet Pastor Majama, meet Sarah Isaac, who later got to come here and visit our Cambridge location on a Sunday morning and roomed with us for 10 days at our house. And so great to take a team there to see what God is doing. And also, so in the world of short-term mission trips, there's often the reality that the trip is really as much about motivating the hearts and growing our understanding of what the global church is doing. But when things really work well, you are also able to bless the group and the community that you go to. And I heard from our partners over there how blessed they were by the team that we were able to take, and how God uniquely orchestrated the different gifts of the people on that team to just be an incredible blessing in teaching and training teachers in a variety of ways over there. For me, we took a couple high school students on the trip, so we had a very intergenerational team. It was awesome to see how the team came together, worked together, see our students, and one of them being my daughter, so I was super proud as a dad, watching her and Solomon just do an incredible job just serving the kids, the kindergarten kids that they were there with so well. Yeah, and then to strengthen that reality by having Sarah come in October, and I was blessed by her presence here on Sunday morning, and just for her to be able to see and see our context and share what was going on both here and with the Hope Story fundraiser. It was good. It was good.
Yeah, and we've seen God working in Tanzania and with many of our other global engagement partners. It's been good to get some of those updates over the course of the year.
I just got an update from Dave and Martina Brubaker a few weeks ago, and Dave was in Uzbekistan exploring some really neat opportunities in the future. For those of you who don't, you just like, where's Uzbekistan? Uzbekistan is at the heart of what was the Silk Road. So it is kind of in a very strategically important place where East meets West, and I think what you're going to hear a lot more about Uzbekistan, I think, in the days to come, because from a geopolitical perspective, it is in a very important strategic spot, and Dave was very excited about some of the opportunities that might be there, and I know he'd appreciate us praying to know that they would know how best to approach those realities.
So yeah, when we talk about our global engagement partners church, like we always want to say, like, they are an extension of us. They are part of our family, and your support of the church is supporting the work that they are doing globally as well. And that's one of the things both of us love about Forward.
Yep.
Is the longstanding history of global engagement.
Well, Kirk, I think a lot of churches either do global or local.
Yeah.
And we tend to default to one or the other, and yet God has called us to both. And one of the things I love about Forward is I think we've got a heart to do both.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. Man, there are so many things we could keep talking about. Yep. So I'm going to try and bring us together for the next couple of minutes and wrap it up in the next few minutes. But, I think about some other positives. Freedom Session. Yep. We've seen God working in powerful ways in Freedom Session. Just even the growth of the number of people. Yeah. We've got like 40 people going through Freedom Session.
We went from like 10 to 40.
Yeah. And what's really cool is like we've got equal men and women that are going out. And I just want to, like, for those of you who are courageous enough to take those steps to walk through something like Freedom Session, thank you, because those are things that are not only going to benefit you, but they're going to benefit us together as a church family as God works in your life and in your heart in those ways. And so we're praying for you as you continue through that journey. And we have seen so many other things. I know we've seen the opportunity for Forward to be a place that other churches are connecting with. Yep. You and I are part of different networks with other pastors. Even just before Christmas, I had 3 different pastors reach out to me about what we're doing in leadership development here and saying, hey, what can we learn from you and how can we be part of this? And we have one of our French partners that we are supporting in our Christmas offering is also connecting with us, and we're working together on some leadership development stuff with them and sharing what God's been teaching us with them to help them with their leadership development. So just cool things that are happening that are impacting us, but going beyond as well, and multiplying how God is using our church family beyond this region. I think it would be really unfair for us to everything is being positive.
No.
I think, for people who are listening who are going, man, it's just like everything's roses and there's no challenges or problems. I think we would both say that we both feel the weight of a lot of different challenges and problems. Maybe just reflect on one challenge in particular that you see for us as a church that we have experienced or we're still experiencing and need to keep developing in.
Yeah, I'm going to speak to one that's pretty personal to me. Many of you will be aware that I came on staff originally at Forward to start our Forward Kitchener location, and one of the consistent challenges over what is now 11 years is a challenge of a facility.
Yeah,
it is. You start portable, that's a challenge, and we experienced a lot of just bouncing around to different spots, and ultimately God graciously provided the spot where we're currently at, but that space comes with its own limitations and challenges, and we've quickly kind of outgrown what we can handle there in some areas, especially in our kids ministry area, and yet just have felt stymied as to how to move forward, because it is a very difficult environment for churches to try and find facilities in.
Yeah.
For a whole bunch of reasons. We can talk about that some other time, but it is a challenge. And then as we look at the need to continue to move forward and to grow, that reality faces us everywhere we kind of look in terms of, okay, well, if we were to help start a new church over here, or we were to start a new plant or site over there, there is a massive, we need God to do miracles. I don't know any other way to put it when it comes to facility stuff than that.
Yep. Yeah, that is definitely
you and
the
I
best
have
way.
spent I don't know how many times just talking and then just staring at each other blankly and kind of banging our head against the wall because we're just out of human options and human understanding as to how to fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in addition to that being a challenge for me, one of the challenges is this. I think that coming out of COVID, a lot of us as a church, we have gotten very busy into the other things of life.
Sure.
That kind of disappeared off the radar screen. And I think that we need to make sure that we are not losing sight of the core thing of being a follower of Jesus. That we stay focused on loving God, loving others, and serving the world. And that, I think, is going to constantly be a challenge for us in the days ahead. There's a lot of things that are pulling for our attention in different directions, and we need to be aware of that. And, I also recognize the other challenge for me has been the sheer volume of people who are hurting.
Yeah.
I know, like, Pastor Greg does such an amazing job caring for people, but I know what Greg's schedule is overwhelmed.
It is, yeah.
And I know that there are others of us on the pastoral team who are investing in caring for people, and we consider it like, please don't hear me. This is not me complaining. No. This is just acknowledging the reality. We consider it an honor to walk with those who are hurting and who are feeling the sting and the pain of life. But man, there's a lot of it.
There is. Yeah. It is heartbreaking. We've talked about this, you and I and Greg. One of the things that we are seeing is that it's also an opportunity. There are people who are not Christians, who are not part of the family of faith, who God is shaking to the core through realities of life and bringing them in through kind of this door of, I just don't know where to turn for the answers of life, right? And I've been experiencing this on Sunday mornings, meeting people who are just showing up out of the blue because the world just doesn't have any answers to offer for what they're struggling with, what they're longing for. And so it's a massive challenge, and it's a heartbreaking reality, but it also is an opportunity for us because, as we've just talked about, over the Advent season, we know where you can find hope and love and joy and peace, those things that our world is starving for.
Yeah. As we flip the calendar into a new year, what are some of the things that you're excited about for us as a church this year? And maybe a couple things we can ask the church to be praying about.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited about the first couple sermon series that we're starting into. So this week we'll start into a series called Out with the Old, In with the New. We're going to talk about what it means to be people who follow Jesus, who put off certain things that come with life before Jesus and put on a new life in Christ, in all the different areas that we've been talking about today in terms of loving God, loving others, and serving the world. And we're just going to camp out in Ephesians 4:17-32. And then we're going to go into the book of Ecclesiastes, which I think I'm excited about, although February in Canada starting into a book whose repeated line is meaningless, everything is meaningless. But I think I think that this book is the cry of the world that surrounds us right now. Yeah. And that is not the ultimate truth that the book wants to get across to us. It's that doesn't have to be the totality of life, that there actually is meaning and hope that's available. So I'm really excited, I think, even for our people. I think this is going to be a series where we're going to speak themes that are going to really resonate with a lot of the people that you have around you in your life, maybe give you some ability to speak into their lives, but also invite them into it. Yeah, I agree. As I think about the new year, obviously we will need to continue to unpack what does the multiply vision mean for us as a church. And so we will invest in those initiatives that we did in our Christmas offering. You'll see the same kinds of initiatives in next year's Christmas offering as we circle around those 4 strategic initiatives. I think that, some things that you can be praying for, church. One is thinking about in Cambridge that we would just have some wisdom and unity in the church around what are the next steps around the building needs here in Cambridge. Being prayer for in Ingersoll, as we're looking for a site pastor in Ingersoll right now, someone who can come in and give some leadership directly to our congregation there, and that God would lead us to the right person. And in Kitchener, just as we continue to
take some strategic steps in reaching the community around Kitchener, that God would give favor to that, and that God would open up the doors around the building needs that you talked about as well. I think those are all things that we want to be in prayer about as we move into the new year. But most importantly, we want to be in prayer that we would be a church where we are just simply submitted to God and what God wants to do in us and through us as a church family, wherever we are, and that we would be committed to the mission God's called us to as a church. That we don't lose sight of that our hearts grow stronger and deeper for that mission that God's called us to. And so be praying for that as a church in the days ahead. And I also just want to say, like, there are a lot more stories we could have talked about, and a lot more ministries. So some of you are sitting there going, they didn't tell this story. They
and
didn't
also,
talk about
we
this
might
ministry.
not know your story.
Right,
and this is one of the things that if you've got a story to share, we would love to hear it.
Yeah.
So that we can share it with others and encourage others.
Yeah.
Because we know we don't know half of what God is doing in and through Forward Church, and we love to be able to hear those stories so we can encourage the hearts of other people.
That's right.
With them.
Couple of big events that I just want to make everybody aware of that's happening over the first half of the year that I think will just be an encouragement to many of you. First of all, we get to host Waterloo Region Worships.
We do,
again.
Yep.
And so just a great opportunity to bring the church from across the region together for a night of worshiping God. Always love WRW. And
the last one, man, the place was rocking.
It was awesome. And then we are going to be hosting a women's conference coming up later in the spring. And Rachel and our women's leadership team, they are all working hard. What's been awesome is they've already started to network with other churches in the region. And so this is going to be a conference that's not just for our women. We're opening it up to women, just like we did with the marriage conference. We're going to do this with a women's conference this year and opening it up to women from all different churches all across the region. So stay tuned for more information on that. Super excited what God's going to do in the lives of our women at that conference. Any final words for the church, Derek, as we wrap up our time?
I don't just say this. I feel truly blessed to be able to serve in the role that I get to serve in, to serve this church. Like it is, people often say, oh, ministry's got to be so tough. And there's hard stuff to ministry, but I have to be really honest. Like, as a church, you often make it very enjoyable, easy to serve you, and I'm so appreciative for that because I know that's not always the case.
Yeah, and I would just echo that and just acknowledge how honored we are both to be able to be in the roles that we're in and serving you as a church, but not just in the roles we're in. Honestly, I'll say this: I just love being part of this church. The people, the connection, the commitment to following Jesus in this church, the love, the genuine love for God and love for each other, and the love for our community that exists in this church is so cool and such an awesome thing to be on the front lines of seeing what God's doing. Yeah. And so thank you, Forward, for just your faithfulness in listening to the Lord's voice and leading in your life over the past year. We celebrate God's goodness. We celebrate you as a church family. And please come into this brand new year with a sense of expectation that God is able to do more than we could dare ask or imagine. Just meditate on that truth as we start into this new year. Can't wait to see how God works in and through you and us collectively as a church family in the next 12 months. God bless you, Forward.